All right, Unit 4, Create with Code Challenge. You've got it all imported. That's steps 1 and 2. And then step 3, hitting an enemy sends it back towards you. It should send it away from the player. So the solution here is in your scripts, in the player controller X. In this script, I'm going to control scroll down to zoom out, but we're looking for an on collision enter because that's what's happening. And away from player is calculated this way. This is backwards. I'm going to control X this and say this minus that. That'll fix that one. Number 4, a new wave spawns when the player gets a power-up. Should be when the enemy balls have been removed. So in this one, we want to go into Spawn Manager X. And in here on line 23, it's every frame checking the enemy count equals find objects with tag power-up. Well, we don't want to, it's counting the enemies, not the power-ups. So we want to be checking for the tag of enemy, not the tag of power-up. That'll fix that one. Number 5, the power-up never goes away. It should only last for a certain duration. So when you pick up a power-up, you're basically got the power-up forever. So the key here is in player controller X. After line 42, if I scroll down here, so this is the on trigger enter. We collide with the power-up. It destroys the power-up, turns on the Boolean, and turns on the indicator that shows us we have a power-up, but it never starts the countdown. We do have the cooldown, the coroutine here, but it's never started. So we just need to start coroutine, tab key, and then we want to start power-up cooldown. And then after 5 seconds, because that's the power-up duration, it'll turn it off and turn off the indicator. At this point in the game, we should be able to collect our power-up, which will last about 5 seconds, or exactly 5 seconds. Boom, which gives us a lot more power, and then the power-up goes off in a much softer hit. If all those things are looking good, you're in the right place. So number 6, 2 enemies are always spawned, and it should be 1 in wave 1, 2 in wave 2, etc. So what's happening here is in the Spawn Manager X, in the update, it's counting, how many enemies there are, and if there are 0, then go ahead and run this function. So as soon as you click on that method function, it highlights down here and says, okay, we're going to run that, and we're going to send it an integer, which, by the way, starts at 1 up here. It's initialized. So it will run this function, so it then goes down here, and it's looking at enemies to spawn. Remember that integer, which starts at 1, because that's what the wave count sends it. Power offset, that's fine. It counts the number of power-ups. If it's 0, go ahead and make a power-up. Down here is what's important. It's always checking, well, if I is less than 2, then instantiate I++, go again, right? Starts at 0, then at 1, and then at 2. 2 is not less than 2, so it doesn't instantiate anymore. So the key here is we don't want this 2 here. We want this to be the enemies to spawn right here, because that is going to be the wave number as well, that it got past this. Remember, wave count sent the function this integer, used now as enemies to spawn. And so now while I is less than enemies to spawn, go ahead and instantiate then I++. So that'll go up 1 each time because the wave count goes up 1 each time. So at this point in the game, if we get our power up here, the first level spawned 1, and then in level 2, 2 spawned, etc., etc. Number 7, the enemy balls are not moving. They should be moving towards the player goal. If we go into Unity, if we expand goals here, notice player goal has a space, P and a G are Pascal case. And if we go into enemy X script, we can see there is a variable for game object player goal, but it never goes and finds it. So in the start here, we can just do a, player goal equals game object dot find, and then if we're going to use quotes, it has to be spelled exactly the same way, which that is then. And then I also public float speed there, and it's then set. It's not declared anywhere in here, which means it's done in Unity. When the enemy is spawned, it's going to have a somewhat slow speed for me, so I jack that speed up to 80. So if you look at the enemy clone, their enemy script, oh, well, they're at 0, so of course we got to change that. Hold on. We better go to our prefabs here. Prefabs, enemy, prefabs, enemy. And then down here, speed, I'm going to set that to like 80. And then hit our little back arrow, hit play. And now the enemy is moving right along. And number 8, when they press spacebar, they should get a boost forward and a particle effect. So in here, we're going to go into player controller X and basically just create a new variable for that boost strength. And then when they hit spacebar, we'll apply it. So we're going to do a public float. We'll call this boost strength. And I'm going to set it equal to 1,000 to begin with. After playing around with numbers, I like that one. And then in the update, currently there's the vertical input to move around and stuff, but we're actually going to do a check-in for the key code space. So we're going to do an if input.get key down like we've done in the previous lessons. And then I like using key codes just because it has the list there for me. Right after you hit the dot, you have all the different letters and numbers and keyboard things. So if key code space, and we'll do a curly and hit enter, we need to add a force to the rigid body. And we already have the player RB here, so we're just going to do player RB dot add force. And then in parentheses, we need to tell it which direction we're going to add that. Well, it's basically the same as this one, right? It's going to be forward, right? So we'll say forward. And then to make it scale with boost strength, we're just going to multiply it there. So I'll tab that. And we want to normalize for time, delta time, so it's not, running faster on fast computers and slow on slow computers. And this is kind of an instant, so we're going to do a force mode impulse. Oops. Now back in Unity, I'm going to test with the spacebar, and that 1,000 that I added, that's just me hitting the spacebar, space, and which is why, again, you could probably put in 2,000, maybe 3,000, but don't go too high because you'll fly through the wall, as I found out. Now, as far as the particle effect goes, I'm just going to grab one from the asset store. You could build one too, of course, but I'm just going to jump straight to the asset store. And I found one earlier I really liked. If you just put in particle and make sure you sort, in this case, by free. I think it was Sherbs. Sherbs, there it is. I like that one a lot. I'm just going to say add assets and then download it. This has one, it's like an angular, it looks like sparks coming out of an angle grinder or something. If you hit open in Unity then, it'll download right there. Or if you download it from the asset store, you can just extract it and double click it and it'll import it here too. So I'm just going to import, all import. Then go down to your particles, normal, and this muzzle flash. If you just throw it in there, you can see what it looks like. If you hit the restart, you can see it's kind of a little spark there, which I kind of like, which is exactly what we want to do. But we want to make this a child of the focal point, and then I'm just going to kind of move it into position so it looks like it's kind of coming off the back of this, which of course I need to spin it around. And if I look over here, it's roughly 180, which is probably the nice even number we're looking for. And let's move it there. That looks pretty good. Now we don't want this to play as soon as you hit the play button. There shouldn't be sparks shooting out, so make sure you uncheck the play on awake. And then in our player script, let me save this and go over to my player script, the player controller. We basically want to have a new variable that knows about that effect, the particle effect, and then we'll tell it when to play when we hit the space bars. So I'm going to do a public particle system, and I'll just call this zoom effects. And we'll assign that in Unity just by dragging and dropping it. And then in here, we have our key code space already. So all we need to do here is tell it to play the particle effect. So we can just say the name of the particle system dot play with parentheses and save. And that will play whatever we assign there. So go back to Unity. And our player script is on here. And here's that particle system it's looking for. So that's the muzzle flash, and it won't play on awake. It will only play, hopefully, when we hit the space bar. Pew, pew. And you can adjust the numbers, of course, for the boost, but there we go. Now we have sparks shooting out when we hit space. In number 9, we want the speed of the enemies to go up a little bit each wave. And really, we already have something going up each wave, and that's the number of enemies. So we're going to use that to our advantage to just multiply their speed by. So if we go into Unity, I'm going to be using a tag here. So on my spawn manager, I'm just going to add a tag here, and I'll call this respawner. And then I'll go to the item and make sure it is tagged. And then I'm going to go to my enemy X script. And basically, we want the enemy X to be able to see this wave count going up, so that we can make this enemy X have their speed be affected by the wave count going up. So in the enemy X, we just need to connect to this other script. So I'm going to do a public, and then you put in the exact name of the script as the variable type, and then I'm just going to call this spawnX. And then inside the start here, we're just going to set that. So on this new line, spawnX, and then we need to tell it to go find the object, and then we're going to get the component of the script. So we're going to do game object dot find game object. Make sure it's singular. Find game object, not objects. Game objects with tag. And then in parentheses, we just put in that tag that we just made. So it finds that game object. Once it's found it, then we can do a get component tab key. And then the component we want is, well, the name of that script that it's wearing. There we go. And that way, now this enemy X script can see this script and access things from within it. So now our speed here for the enemy, we're actually going to kind of manipulate that a little bit. So we're going to say speed equals, we have the spawn X already, and then remember, we can access the variables that are in there. So I'm going to do that wave count. Hold on, let me do the dot again. Dot wave, there it is. Wave count. And then I'm going to multiply by, I really should make this a variable. Let's call this level speed increaser. Which doesn't exist yet. So I need to go throw that up here as a variable. Public float level speed increaser. And I'm going to set this to 60.0 for now. That way we can play around with it in Unity and see if it's something that we like. But that way the speed is always going to be going up based on the wave count. Now to see if this actually works, I'm going to check each wave and look at the enemy. So here, enemy has a speed of 120. I'm just going to get out of their way and let them hit the goal. And then in wave 2, if I click on an enemy, now their speed is 180. I'm in the way. Sorry, guys. And now they're gone. Now let's get out of their way and look at the enemy is now 240. So it is scaling up, and then you can just adjust this number to make it the speed that you want.